and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do my August wrap up. Now this is a video that was supposed to go up last week, but when I was editing the initial video, I just really hated it. It was a rambling, long 40-minute mess, and I just didn't feel proud to put that out there because even I didn't want to listen to myself. So I figured we're going to redo this. We're going to refilm and I will re-give my opinions in a hopefully better, more concise manner. Now the month of August ended up being not with any I didn't plan this, but it ended up being a month where I ended up just tying up loose ends, finishing books that were that I was in the middle of the reading, and just kind of clearing my TBR, just getting rid of all the books that were starting to stack up next to my bed. And for whatever reason, you know, some of these books, they just kind of languished, but I'll go through that. So let me just show you the 3 books that I finished. So I finished Deux vacances by Jules Verne, so 2 years of vacation, which you remember I started on my Philippines vacation. Then I also finished L'Argent de Zola, or Money by Zola, which is a book that I had started before my Philippines vacation, I believe, and then didn't get back to it even when I came back. And then the last book that I ended up finishing is a book from all the way back in January where I read majority back then, and I finally finished the last 20 pages, and that book is Trouble with Lichen by John Wyndham. So these are the 3 books I have finally finished, and I feel so happy that I finished. Let's start with Trouble with Lichen, because this I think would be the biggest surprise to you guys, since yes, I did read the majority of this in either the month of January or February. It's only a 250-page soap book, and I struggled with it, or at least I struggled reading the end. So the book is about these 2 biochemists that discover this particular lichen and its ability to basically extend life, or in a better sense of the word, to maintain your youth. So you keep your youthful exterior, but you're actually quite old. And so the Diana Brackley, who was one of the biochemists, she takes the initiative and she brings it to the beauty industry, and she creates this like private cream when she has a very select few of clients. And this is a science fiction, so John Wyndham is the author of Day of the Triffids, so I absolutely adored that book. He also wrote The Midwich Cuckoos, which is another book that I read that I really quite enjoyed. And so I have experience with his books. I've very much enjoyed his books, and I was really thinking I was going to enjoy this one because it says that the main character Diane sees an opportunity to overturn the male status quo and free women from the career versus children binary. In short, a chance to remake the world. So when I had initially read that blurb, that really excited me. And I can say that this book doesn't mention those things. It does very much talk about the fact that because of this lichen and because of the ability of these women, obviously both men and women can consume the lichen or use the lichen in the beauty product. However, Diana, the main character Diana, has limited her clients to just women. So the idea is that with women, by being able to extend their youth and be able to extend their age, they finally have the opportunity to do everything. So for many women, they are required to choose either having a family or having a career. It's very difficult to have both. But with this drug and having more time in the world, the women can focus on their career, and then they still have plenty of time to have a family. Or it can be the opposite. They can use their very youth, create a family, and then when the kids grow up, they can go with their career. But it just gives women a lot more options. And I really liked that idea. And while John Wyndham does discuss it, I do feel like his book got muddled along the way, which is why I struggled so hard to just read the last 20 pages. It took me 7 months to finally sit down and read the end of this book. And to be honest, the last 10 pages of the book, I actually read right before I filmed the video last week when I was planning on having this film out last week. So I struggled with this. I thought the message got really jumbled. Now, it is very typical for science fiction where basically you have a really great idea, it's going to create this really good society, it's going to have all these benefits, but obviously because humanity is humanity, we can't let good things happen and we have to destroy them, especially if it benefits people who aren't us. And so with that, it creates paranoia and it creates just like this disastrous situation where you basically have to break down what's been created. And it makes sense because there are a lot of very logical, very sensible arguments against this new technology. And so it makes sense. It's just the way that John Wyndham puts it all together. I think the message just kind of got lost in the chaos, where it kind of felt to me that we didn't know who was where and what they were doing anymore, and like for what reason. And even Diane Brackley's motivation becomes very muddled, and I really didn't understand her character at the end. I just didn't understand what she was aiming for, to be honest, once she created the beauty industry that she created so that she could push the Lichen out there. So it was just a mix of not understanding the character's motivations anymore, with a very chaotic, just muddled mess of a plot progression. So this book I definitely had struggled with. I still love the idea, and I think the book is still worth reading for the idea, but I would be curious as to how many other people were a little just confused by the execution. But finally happened to finally have read that and to read the end, because that's why I didn't DNF it, because I was like, well, I only have 28 pages left. And I just really wanted to know, where is John Wyndham going with this? Like, what was his aim with the end of the book? So then I had the next two books. So the Zola and the Verne. So these are two books. The Zola I was reading as my PDF book at work, and the Jules Verne, as I mentioned, I started reading this on my beach vacation in the Philippines because I thought it was the perfect setting for this book. And these are two books that I struggled to get back into, because I have to admit that I wasn't really in the mood to read these books. I was reading them. I was diligently reading along, and I was turning the pages and I was making progress, but I realized that I wasn't really enjoying as I usually would enjoy a Verne or a Zola. I just wasn't really enjoying the process of reading these books. It felt like I was kind of just turning the pages to turn the page and to have, to occupy my time with reading. So I took a break from these books and I took a step back, and then I came back to them later. It was a good 3, maybe 4 weeks before I came back to them. And then I really ended up liking and enjoying the latter half of these books. So it creates a little bit of wishy-washy, kind of weak emotion towards these books. But overall, I have to say that I still really enjoyed them, as I typically do enjoy a Zola and Verne. Maybe not as strong as the other works I've read by them, but I still enjoy them. I just had a very weak start to them. I had a very mild reaction to the beginning of the books. So Zola, l'argent, money, is one of the books in the Rougon-Macquart cycle. The Rougon-Macquart cycle is a cycle that basically focuses on this French family who are kind of split in between the Rougon side and the Macquart side, where basically the Rougon side are supposed to be a little bit more higher class, more elite, and the Macquart side are supposed to be more working class, slightly less educated, etc., etc. And within this, we look at this family with the backdrop of Napoleon and France at the time, and Paris at the time, etc. So you have a lot going on in the political background, and all of these books are based on like one very, very realistic aspect of French society at this time. L'Argent, in this case, is looking at one of our characters from the previous book, because I am reading this book in the chronological order, and the book before that was La Curée, which was The Kill. And this book takes the character from The Kill, from La Curée, and basically he lost his fortune and he wants to bring it back up. And so he's using the French stock market to do that. So this focuses on the financial proceedings of what was going on in Paris at the time period. And you have our main character who's going in and out of it. so that Zola can explore this aspect of society. So our main character is trying to rebuild his fortune via the stock market, but also via the creation of a universal bank. He has this idea to create this universal friendship bank that will overcome all the other banks. He specifically has a lot of rancor towards the Jewish who seem to be it's built out of jealousy, because he sees all these Jewish banks and Jewish businesses and Jewish conglomerations and just Jewish associates who seem to be having so much success, continual success, immense success, while he just keeps like flopping everywhere. And so he takes that anger and that jealousy and that rancor towards the Jewish people, and he decides to create this universal bank that not only will bring France to a more prosperous setting, but it also kind of like, show those Jewish people, oh, we're better than you, France is better than you, etc., etc. And this was excellent. I mean, Zola is always going to be excellent. I can never say it's not going to be excellent. Like I said, I had a little bit of a mild reaction to the beginning, but I have to state that there is a question of mood, but also I am very weak when it comes to anything financial. I do tend to have my eyes glaze over when it comes to reading the stock market and talking about finance and money all the time, and shorting the game and not shorting the game, and the manipulation of people so that they bring their fortunes into the bank, and you're giving them all these positive thoughts like, oh yes, I'm gonna make you so much money and all your troubles are gonna go away, but you're really just screwing them over. So I really have a lot of reading all of that is really difficult. The language around it is also quite difficult. It's not really an easy read. And then I have to say that in this particular book, there are also a lot of characters, and it did take me a while to sort of be able to parse the role of each of the side characters. It turns out they are equally quite important. There's no one that is extraneous that could have been cut out. They're all very important to the story, and they make the story interesting. But it did take me a while to really parse who was who, what their role was, and what their effect on this book will be. But it all comes out to an end when the second half of the story, where the finance part kind of gets like the creation of the bank. The bank has not been created, it's doing its thing. Our main character is doing all of his manipulation, so that sort of goes off to the side, and then we go back into the human side of the story, the interactions of all the characters, and there we have a lot more plot progression, and the book becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more enjoyable to read, to where by the end I was again very, very much invested in this book and really enjoyed this. So happy to have finished that. And then the other book that, Deux vacances, 2 years of vacation. I had brought this onto my Philippines vacation because it's a book about a shipwreck on an island. These young boys, about 15 of them, are shipwrecked on the island. The boat is so damaged that they can't repair it to try and find their way back to the mainland. They are able, however, to salvage the contents of the boat, so they're able to salvage like sewing kits and all the food that was that had been put on the boat, and all of the utensils and tools that they'll need to create a new community, a new society, and to basically survive on this island for the 2 years that they are on. Now, Jules Verne is very much, I say he has 3 types of books. He has his very, very much adventure books. He has his very much science fiction books. And then he has his books in the middle that very much combine both. The ones in the middle tend to be his most famous. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or Journey to the Center of the Earth, where he combines this sort of like fantastical like ideas of science and theories of science, and he blends that in with a really, really fun adventure story. Those are his most famous books, but they're very, very each side is very interesting to read. This lands on the more adventure side, and the thing with Jules Verne is that you pretty much know where all the books are going to go. There's an adventure, there's a struggle, but at the end of the day, everything is going to be fine. So these boys are going to be good. They're going to find their way somehow. So you're really here just for the journey of how do they survive on the island? What do they do? What is their everyday like? How do they scavenge for food? How do they create traps? How do they educate the young boys? How do they deal with being as very young boys with very differing opinions? So you're really reading about that, especially in the first like 2/3 of the book. In the last third of the book, that's where you're gonna have a little adventure picks up. They have a few issues they have to deal with. Some peril comes onto the island, and then eventually they have to find a way off the island. But it is a long book. Both of these books, even though they look quite small, these are actually 500-page books. And this is 500 pages long. It's one of Jules Verne's longer books. He does have a lot longer than this, but it is, he does, the majority of his books are actually like the 300-page book to be 300-page mark. And so yeah, this is 500 pages. So it is a lot of adventure in terms of like just trying to survive in the wild. So there is a lot of that to go through before it actually gets into the real like plot advancing adventure. So it is definitely one of the slower books. But I think if you just kind of go into this book expecting that, I think you can really enjoy this. And I did enjoy this, but I am very thankful that because of the break I took from reading, I was able to clear my head. I was able to refresh the senses, refresh my mood, and refresh my excitement for reading. And that helped me actually enjoy the book. It was really to the point where I brought this book to the beach one weekend, and I just read 100 pages right then and there. So Jules Verne's writing is still top notch here, but I definitely needed the break when my mood was a little bit wonky. So I finished that book. And then I have one more book to talk about in terms of novels or just fiction. And that is this short story called Backlight by Kanji Hanawa. Now, before I talk about the short story itself, I actually want to talk more about this press. So this is called Red Circle Minis. It's a brand new press created by Richard Nathan and a partner. And if you look at their website, their whole idea was to bring more Japanese writers into the English language. And the thing that's interesting about this is for right now, they're all short stories. So they're all these little tiny little booklets. They're all individual short stories. And the thing that's interesting is that these books were actually, even though they're written in Japanese, they have not been published in Japan yet. They're being written in Japan, they're written in Japanese, immediately translated to English, and being published into English first. So it's really the whole idea of bringing the excitement of the Japanese publication industry to the English language industry. And because of that, I think that as this idea is very, very interesting, and it's going to, I will keep my eye on this press to see what they do, because I think it's a really good idea. This particular short story, however, I was not very fond of. In fact, I own this because I received this from a friend when we did a trade for books that I didn't want anymore and that she didn't want anymore. And I decided on this one. And she also was feeling very lackluster about this book. She didn't really enjoy it. In fact, there's even a dog ear. It's only 50 pages long, but there's a dog ear on page 39. So she couldn't even finish this in one sitting, basically. She had to put it down at some point. But I mean, let me give you the blurb. It's a story that revolves around the extraordinary real story of the 7-year-old boy who went missing in the bare inhabited forests of northern Japan for 6 whole days in 2016 after his parents had apparently abandoned him as a punishment. Now, I quite remember this event, and yeah, it was on the news quite a bit, but when it comes to writing a short story about the event, I was kind of writing like, what is there to write about? What are you going to write about? And what Hanawa ends up writing about, and it turns out he's an Akutagawa Prize nominated author, so this should be down the lines of what I typically enjoy, but he decided to go via the child psychology route. So his main character is not a child psychologist, but a psychologist who has experience with child psychology. And the whole book is this protagonist or this character talking to another character in the same field and them going over their ideas of what could be going on in the situation with the child. However, the short story doesn't remain just on the situation with the child. It really talks about child psychology in general. even going so far as like comparing children in Japan with children in America, in the terms of how in this particular story, the parents, because it was a punishment, the parents abandoned the child. And they were saying, so basically the parents were pushing the child outside, while he said in the US, for example, when you punish a child, you prevent them from going outside and you keep them in the home. So he's talking about the cultural difference, or I think the professor's a woman. So she's talking about the cultural differences and how that can lead to differences in child psychology, etc., etc. And yeah, okay, that's all really good, but did it make for an interesting short story? No, it really didn't. Let me read you a quote by Alex Pearl, who's the author of Sleeping with the Blackbirds. He writes in the very back, he writes a little paragraph about his thoughts on the short story to give his admiration and positive praise for it. And he writes, "The universal and timeless theme of this thought-provoking and intriguing story is one of identity and self-worth. It cleverly touches on the realms of family dynamics, child psychology, and even the influence of legends and fairy tales on the collective consciousness, whether inside or outside Japan. And as the story closes, we come to fully understand our protagonist's initial cynicism and reluctance to take part in the search for the missing boy in the first place." So I read that, and I don't disagree with Alex Pearl, because all those things are in this book. But I think he definitely got more out, or Alex Pearl could be a woman. Actually, Alex Pearl could be a woman's name. So Pearl definitely got more out of this book than I did, for sure. Like we definitely read the same thing. I'm not missing anything. But I just didn't really see the point of this particular short story. So keeping an eye out on the press, just wasn't really fascinated by that story. Then to finish out the month, I ended up finishing or continuing quite a few manga series. I ended up reading the latest two volumes 102 and 103 in the French translation of the famous detective manga series, Detective Conan. This revolves around, because I've never ever given the plot, this revolves around a high school student named Shinichi Kudo, who one day in a case goes way over his head when he encounters the black organization, and they tried to kill him by giving him this drug. However, instead of killing him, the drug just makes him shrink in size to where he is now the size of an elementary student. And basically, to protect himself and to protect his family while still trying to figure out who the society is, he goes under the name of Edogawa Conan. And it's a story that has the background of the main overarching plot of the Black society and trying to figure out who they are, what the drug is, trying to bring them down. But there's also just a bunch of standard detective mystery stories that sort of act as like the filler in between the main story and the main plot. So I read the latest two volumes in the French translation. And then I also decided to start a new series. I didn't quite know what to read, so I decided to go for a soccer manga. This is not necessarily a new series, it's a sequel to the original Shoot series. The Shoot series does not, it finishes on a bit of a cliffhanger in terms of like the sort of the love triangle, and the characters are still only in high school at that time, so this is a continuation of this. This is actually, they're still in high school, it turns out, but I decided to start this short story, 12 volume sequel, and I'll talk about that more in September because I finished it. I finished reading. And then there was one more manga that I read, and this is a manga that I actually finished in its entirety, and that is the manga Parasyte, or Kiseju, other known as Parasyte in English. I read volumes 3 through 8 to finish up the series, and this was absolutely fantastic. It's a story about these parasites one day kind of float down from the skies. They land and they immediately start to attack humans. And the way they attack humans is that they try to go through the ear, the nose, or the mouth so that they can overtake the brain and take over the human, to where they now have full control of the brain and the human has is basically dead at that point. But so the parasites overtake their body. However, there's one parasite, when he tries to attack our main character, Shinichi, he's unable to go through the ears because our main character was wearing headphones. Now, if the parasite doesn't go into a human fast enough, they will die outside of a body and outside of their little seed capsule. So in a moment of desperation, the parasite decides to go through his right arm, to pierce his skin and go through his right arm. Shinichi, our main character, he realizes this, grabs the wires of a headphone, creates a tourniquet, suffocates the parasite to where the parasite isn't able to go to the brain. And so that for the parasite, because the parasite wants to survive, the parasite decides to just take over his right arm and nothing more. So now that you have a character who has a parasite, he can't control his right arm, or he can't control it when the parasite is controlling it. But basically, he kind of creates a symbiotic relationship between the parasite, his right arm, which he calls migi meaning right in Japanese. So he creates a symbiotic relationship with Migi, where Migi is this really fascinating parasite who has almost his own sort of, he has his own personality, his own thought process, his own way of thinking, and he's very much information, like knowledge obsessed. So he just spends his nights and days just reading and absorbing information, and just really taking a look at trying to understand human society, and in a way trying to understand his place now. So the thing is that the story of the series as a whole is that, so all these parasites have come down and they've taken over the bodies of all these humans, and their first reaction is just survival. So they start killing a bunch of humans and they eat the humans. So this creates this huge panic over this mysterious killing spree that the police are trying to keep on a down low to not create more of a problem. And so so it kind of becomes this really fascinating look, because eventually the parasites realize that it's actually not a good idea to spend all their time just killing and eating humans, because obviously the humans don't like that. So they try to kill all the parasites. And so for the parasites, for their own survival, start to think, okay, well, maybe we need to start taking part into society. And so they observe humans, and they look like they study human law and human society, and they try to observe patterns in humans to try to sort of imitate them, or try to basically create a rule for themselves. So it becomes this really interesting manga about, basically, it just looks at like the hypocrisy of humanity, and it looks at human society and how we've created this society with these certain rules. And it actually ends up being really, really fascinating. I really, really enjoyed this. Now, I did mention when I first started talking about this manga in the last wrap up about how the art is very simple. There's no, like, it's very white. And what I mean by white is that there's like no background. Like, he very rarely draws background. He basically just draws the characters that are in the scene and their dialogue with each other, and then a little bit of action if action is required. But it's just very white. There isn't much, there isn't a lot of detail. There isn't a lot of background. I'm trying to find pages that don't have spoilers. But like, this is an example of like a more detailed page, for example. But yeah, so I was hesitant about the art. I didn't really like it. I still can't say that I love the art. It's not my favorite style, but I think it actually kind of works for this particular manga, because the parasites, in trying to become human, at the very beginning, they're not doing very well. So they all sort of, they don't understand the concept of emotions and using your face to express yourself. They don't understand how to control their faces. So all the characters kind of look like each other, which for me shows a deficit in the art. But in terms of this manga, it works, because right now the parasites don't have the ability to show individuality, so they are going to all kind of look the same. So it's a weird thing where the art works for it, even though for me it's not my favorite thing. So Okay, we're only at 30 minutes. It's a lot better than my previous video. Let me finish this video with telling you very briefly what I'm currently reading. My new read that I'm reading via PDF at work is War and Peace. I know that out of left field, especially considering when I did my book haul based on the English book sale. War and Peace was like one of the only books I left behind because I was thinking to myself, I'm not going to read this anytime soon. I already picked up a Tolstoy in my basket. There's no reason for me to pick this up. And that's like the one book I'm reading right now. Currently, as I'm filming this, I am actually already halfway through that book. And so while I don't expect to finish it in September, I am expecting to finish it in mid-October. So I'm currently reading War and Peace via PDF. For physical book, I'm reading 2 books currently. One of them is I've started finally my new Chinese classic. I've started volume 1 of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. This one I'm only 200 pages in this. This one I've been a little bit distracted, so I haven't been as active in reading, but I am still very much enjoying myself. And so I'm reading volume of 1 of that. The book that's been distracting me lately is because work has been very slow lately. So I've been using the time to, after I finish my pages of War and Peace, because I haven't been reading, I've been limiting myself to just 50 pages. I can't read more, but I am allowed to read less. If I don't read 50 pages on like Monday, so let's say I only read 40 pages on Monday, that doesn't mean I read 60 pages on Tuesday to catch up. It just means I read 50 pages and that's it. Because more than that, it's so tiring. So the work has been very so slow that I've been using after I finish all my works, I've had like 2 hours in the afternoon, and I just pulled out a book and studying. I figured out if it's Japanese, it counts as studying. So I've been reading this book,暗黒女子by Akiyoshi Rikako. 暗黒女子means like dark girls, like sinister, that's a good word. Sinister girls. So I would be like sinister, like high school girls basically. Or basically these girls are part of a literature society at school, and they've come together for an event where they all share short stories about who killed the president of their literature society. This is an author I've read before. I read her book called Seibo, which means Holy Mother, and that one I had actually really enjoyed. I don't read a lot of suspense books, but when I read in Japanese, I definitely allow myself to read more genres than I would typically read in English, just because that's a better way to study a language, is to widen your horizons and read outside of your comfort zones and stuff like that. But I had actually really enjoyed that particular book. I thought it was really fun. So I wanted to read another one. So I've owned this one for like a few years, and I finally picked it up. And I'm on page 120 out of 280. I do expect myself to finish this in the month of September. So you should be seeing this in my next wrap up. So that's the book I've also been reading in Japanese. And then just to say, I did say I finished reading Shoot, but I actually lied. I have 1 more volume to read this month in September, but I will be done in September. And I'm mostly done with this volume anyway, but I'm currently finishing this particular soccer manga series. So there you go, that's what I'm currently reading. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video was better than the video you won't see, but the video I had initially planned on pulling out, because that was just a disaster. It was so bad. So this one feels better already. It feels better already. Also, you're gonna have a very good surprise, I think, in the next video. Whatever that is, I have no idea. I'm out of ideas right now, but I think you'll have a good surprise. So I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.